All right, back on Open Line tonight as we discuss school choice and school vouchers in Tennessee. It has been a great debate tonight between our two guests. We appreciate that, and we appreciate your calls. So let's get right to Darren on line one. Hey, Darren, welcome in.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. Darren, you there?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, my question is, we give money to metro schools. I understand that people want to send their kids there, and the teachers, they want to pay raises. But every year we get increases in our budget, but every year we get more and more schools put on the priority list. What are we going to do as a school system to fix that problem? If I had a kid in metro, I would send them out. But we need to do something to improve our schools. Because they're getting worse and worse.
All right, thank you for that. Andy, what would you say to that caller? If we did have that $1.7 billion, how would we spend it on our schools, and how long would it take?
Yeah, so, I mean, we have underfunded schools in Tennessee for years. There are outstanding schools in Metro Nashville, in Memphis. There are the iZone schools that do incredibly well. I think, so one, if we were going to spend that money, we would spend it on hiring counselors. We would spend it on paying teachers in Nashville, especially more, which were not well paid compared to their counterparts in other parts in the country. So that's important. And I think the other part of that equation is, and the thing we don't talk about and makes people uncomfortable and makes the previous mayor and maybe even the current mayor uncomfortable, is poverty. And Chris Barbick, who ran the Achievement School District, left Tennessee after a while and said, you know, we used to do all this chest bumping and talk about how charter schools were great. And the reality is, when you have a high concentration of poverty, it's really difficult to move the needle. And addressing issues like living wage and healthcare for all and things like that, those systemic changes, the systemic racism in these communities of color around the state are problems that make elected leaders uncomfortable, but must be dealt with. And continuing to ignore those issues, incarceration rates, all of those problems, societal problems, schools can't fix.
Right.
We're seeing right now in COVID, for example, we count on schools to feed kids. We count on schools to feed families because we're not, as a society in Nashville, we are failing. We have chosen collectively as a society in Nashville to fail the poor and working class among us, and that's unacceptable.
But Andy, is the answer bigger government, more spending, more burden on the taxpayer, or is there another answer? Is there something more innovative?
Well, I'll tell you what the answer is these private school schemes that in state after state have failed to educate kids. And I also would welcome, looking at states like Kentucky that have moved the needle, they made a commitment in 1990. Tennessee changed the formula in 1992, but Kentucky made a commitment that has them in the top 20 in just about every category in terms of education achievement. And Tennessee has not made that funding commitment over time. And so there is empirical evidence in a state that looks a lot like Tennessee where that actually works.
Sure, and you've studied it. Arif, Andy makes a point here about, the underlying issues. There are economic issues, socioeconomic issues in these marginalized communities, and there's no guarantee that even if you give a parent choice to put their child in a different school, there are other issues here at home, mom or dad, maybe single parent, grandparent raising the child. There's crime. I mean, we can go on and on, like Andy said. How do you answer that, Arif?
Well, I think parents, if there was crime on one side of the neighborhood, for example, and they wanted to help direct their child away from there, they had a choice to do so. In any other aspect of parenting, they would probably do so, right? And here, if you're in a school where you're getting bullied and it's a bad situation, you have to work and you can, barely spend much time with your child because you're trying to, earn an honest living. School choice just adds another choice. And parents, the idea that the choice is somehow offensive to the public school system, there is no $1.7 billion exception to the Tennessee Constitution. The General Assembly speaks to benefit people because the power comes from the people. The rights of the people are enshrined in this entire document. And this idea that giving parents a choice when the state already uses taxpayer money to fund education is somehow offensive because the parents are choosing is completely at odds with the structure, the constitutional architecture of the Constitution of the state of Tennessee. And schools should get the funding that they need. But if there's a problem where it's chronically failing, no matter how much money has gone on over a period of time, and maybe there's other contributors, perhaps just decentralizing education by just allowing parents more choice and options will add a net benefit, as it has in myriad other things in our world.
Arif, are you saying that those who oppose this type of program, that really it has nothing to do with some of these issues, that really it has to do with losing control, losing kind of centralized power, you call it a monopoly, and giving up choice?
Yeah, what I'm saying is, if you go and just like this debate that we're having today, if you listen to both sides and you just take a step back and just look at the frame, my opponent speaks from a frame that you'd expect to hear from an institution, from bureaucrats at work, from school system or public school union lobbyists, and that's because it's not viewed through the eyes of a child who is an individual. And when school choice programs empower parents to help breathe life into that individuality by making the right choice, and it's constitutionally sound, of course. That's why state Supreme Court after state Supreme Court have upheld school choice programs, and we've been up to the U.S. Supreme Court twice on school choice. We've won both times, and we're about to hopefully win again in Espinoza, the Montana Department of Revenue. And the reason is because no matter how many times you try to frame the debate in terms of money, ultimately what folks like to do is try to such an extent they want it there, as opposed to empowering parents to direct it elsewhere, that they're willing to go to court and kill programs that the General Assembly itself has passed. I think that both sides, should be able to live in harmony here. There's no one size fits all to education, and school choice just represents that. But most people end up going to assigned schools because they do a good job, and that's good if they do that.
So, Andy, how do we get the General Assembly to spend more money on schools? How do we get the word out and really stress the importance? As Arif said, we elect these folks. How do we get through to them then? And in your position, saying, hey, we need more help.
Well, so that's interesting. The elected officials that the people in Nashville and Memphis have chosen, these are the same people that the only two districts in the state that give vouchers, by the way, are Nashville and Memphis, and that's the way the program is directed. You've had bills by Jason Powell here in Nashville, by Bob Freeman, that would change the BEP funding formula, that would increase money. And so there is definitely a realization by some in the legislature that that we need that solution, and so that's an important step to keep having that conversation. What's more important, I think, is a conversation we haven't had in the legislature in a long time. Let's raise the minimum wage in Tennessee. Let's expand Medicaid and provide access to health care for families. Let's make sure that the school system is not responsible for providing food for people because their moms and dads can work and earn enough money to live in Nashville or Memphis and actually make a living. And so those larger systemic issues are important. I keep going back to this argument. Arif talks about choice, and that's great. One, we have lots of choices in Nashville and Memphis, and two, we have a ESA scheme that apparently nobody actually wants because people aren't signing up for it in large numbers.
So, in order to do that, though, Andy, how do we pay for it? I mean, Tennessee folks don't like the T word, taxes. They don't want their taxes going up, but obviously we have to raise revenue in order to. If it takes a village, and we have a lot of people who say, hey, go ahead, raise my taxes, I want to help. Other people would say, no way, it might hurt the economy. How do you respond to that?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, we have, and COVID changes this calculus a little bit, but prior to this kind of global pandemic, we have about $3.3 billion in reserves in Tennessee. Right. That's outside of the rainy day fund. We have lots, so that half of that money would cover the $1.7 billion deficit I'm talking about. The TASR, again, a bipartisan group, talks about. So we have plenty of spare money. Now, again, the current crisis makes that a little different, but there is money in storage, so to speak, that we could be investing in our public schools. And so the point, again, pre-COVID, and possibly if everything goes well with the reopening post-COVID, we can fund these schools without raising state taxes. We can do both.
Andy, Arif, I know you want to respond, but I want to get to another phone call. Let's just go here to Jack on line 2. Hey, Jack.
Yeah, I would like to encourage your guest to burst into flames live on TV because that would elevate this debate to a national platform. But my comment is related to a book by a Vanderbilt professor by the name of Jonathan Metzl. Called Dying of Whiteness. And he did a detailed study of multiple states and how they funded things and whether the kind of poverty vow that our state has taken relative to educational funding is better or worse for the students, the state, and the population. And it's unequivocal. There is no question about it. You look at the data, it speaks for itself. Now, I'm a rabid independent, so I don't like either party. But when people are trying to run a ring of smoke around my head with nonsense, I don't really take it very well. And unfortunately, a lot of the so-called debates that we have on topics such as this are filled with nonsense and words like choice and freedom and liberty, which are all just nonsensical words that don't mean anything, because if every student is not getting an adequate education, then we have a problem. And I would encourage anybody who lives here in town to drive out on Highway 100 and you'll see a private school that looks like a college campus called Ensworth. Now, I'm not criticizing Ensworth, but you can see that they're probably spending $30,000 per pupil on that campus, if not more. And we have other schools that are just about falling down. So there's a choice. If we win the lottery, we can send our daughters to Ensworth. If we don't, we can just struggle through with Nashville schools in their current state of decrepitude, and we can have arrogant state legislators try to say, oh, we should give more money to privately run education, many schools which are religious, and never bother to fully fund the public school system.
Hey, Jack, thanks so much for your call. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, guys, you're going to respond after the break. I got to take another commercial. I'm sorry. We'll be right back after this. Stay with us.